Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, first I'm just really grateful that you shared that because what you're describing is so common. One moment, one diagnosis, one sentence, one traumatic season, or multiple, and the brain makes a conclusion to survive. It forms rules like this will never change, or my body is unsafe, or I'm stuck like this, I'm doomed. And like you said, when that thought repeats for years, it stops feeling like a thought and it starts feeling like a fact, right? But it's still a pathway. Okay, it's not a prison. In my practice, I've seen people absolutely renew their minds after decades of trauma, abuse, spiritual bondage, and fear patterns that have been long standing. And like you said, it's not overnight. It's not with denial, but it's with consistent truth, nervous system regulation, and the healing work of God. We're not depending on wishful thinking it here, right? It's science and scripture. And so I have watched panic decrease and sleep return and bodies come out of chronic tension and people stop being ruled by the same old thoughts that once hijacked them. And the most powerful shift is when someone realizes that my symptoms were adaptations. My reactions were learned, and what is learned can always be unlearned. And so I want to speak to all the questions that you had in that too. I do want to just mention that I'm totally okay going over the time a little bit. If anyone else has another question, I know I went over a little bit, so there's no rush here. But I want to speak to the rest of what you said too, because I mean, in real life, here is what healing mentally and emotionally looks like. Since neuroplasticity means your brain is always updating based on what it repeatedly experiences. And so, like I mentioned, trauma wires the brain for threat, for hypervigilance, for worst case scenario thinking. But healing rewires the brain for flexibility, for clarity, for safety, and that happens through repeated experiences of naming what's happening without shame, of replacing the lie with truth, of practicing regulation so your body can calm down. That's a lot for anyone to go through, but over all these years, your body has to unlearn some things. And also creating new responses when the old triggers show up. So, yes, it's possible to renew from 23 years of a thought, because the brain does not care how long the pathway has been there as much as it cares what you're repeatedly practicing next. Time matters, but repetition matters more. And when someone mentions abuse or soul ties, I think of it like this: like trauma can create emotional and spiritual attachments to fear and shame and survival. And those ties can be real, but they also can be broken, and but often God's process is both deliverance and discipleship, meaning he can sever what was attached to you and then he also rebuilds what was stolen from you, whether it's identity, safety, trust, healthy connection. And so this is why healing is not just stop thinking the wrong thought, it's replacing it with a new foundation. And the word becomes more than information, it becomes a new internal home. um, I hope that makes sense. And with the physical part too, that matters because complete physical healing is also possible, but it's not something any of us can promise or control, right? And what I can say confidently is that many physical symptoms are either caused by intensified, you know, chronic stress, trauma load, inflammation, nervous system dysregulation, like all of that can intensify physical symptoms. And when the nervous system calms and the body gets out of survival mode, the body often responds with that real change you're talking about seeing, like reduced pain, better digestion, lower tension, improved sleep, fewer flare-ups, more energy. Even when a medical condition remains, people often experience significant relief and a completely different quality of life. So You might not be able to control every diagnosis, but you can absolutely heal the trauma response that got built around it. And that alone can transform the body. God's not asking you to pretend that it didn't happen. He's inviting you to stop letting it define what's happening next for you. A diagnosis may be a fact, but it's not your identity. A pattern may be old, but it's not permanent. A thought could even be so loud it's the only thing that you experience, but that's not the voice of God. And so, or it doesn't have to be, it's not always the voice of God is what I meant. But I've seen people come out of decades long cycles and become mentally free and emotionally healed, and whether that's spiritually, physically, whatever it is, than they ever thought they could be. So short answer, yes, renewal is real, healing is real. It's possible to become a new person on the inside even after a long time. And I want to say in response to that too, the balance is this: your responsibility is partnership, and God's responsibility is the power. So your job is not to heal yourself. Your job is to keep your heart open, keep your mind anchored in truth, and keep showing up in agreement with what God says, even while your body is still telling a different story. Confession and thought renewal are not tools to earn healing, right? They're ways to stay aligned with God's voice instead of the fear that trauma and pain try to preach at us. Confession is not a performance to gain anything. It's positioning. It's you saying, Lord, I'm choosing your truth as my home, even when I'm still in the fight. Psalm 23 says he prepares a table in the presence of my enemies. It sounds like you got a lot of enemies, but he's still going to prepare that table in the presence of them. It doesn't say in the absence of my enemies. It says in the presence. And so there's grace for that, right? Grace means you're not disqualified even on the days you forget your confessions. If you wake up and your scars feel loud, or you feel tired, or you have a moment of fear, that doesn't cancel your faith. Faith isn't never feeling the battle. Faith is returning to God in the middle of it. And that grace is what holds you when your physical strength dips, right? His grace is sufficient. So practically, I teach it like this: do what's yours, guard your mind, speak life, bring your thoughts back, take care of your body, ask for prayer, get support, keep choosing hope, but release what is God's. So that's the timing of it. That's the outcome. That's the miracle. That's the deeper restoration in places that you physically cannot reach by yourself. And scars aren't proof that you lost. Scars are like, it's the beauty of the proof that we've survived something. In the kingdom, they can become your testimony. This was war, but God sustained me, and I'm still standing. And so the battle here, I'll say it like this: the balance of the balance is not pressure versus passivity. I would say the balance is just you having that peaceful persistence. You keep agreeing with God, not anxiously striving. And His grace meets you in the gap between what you see and what you're believing for.